My name is Greg. You might know me as WinCubes, Guinness, Winstormu, etc. I wanted to make a bit of a unscripted video about a recent hobby that I picked up in the past half a year. I have just finished my 100th digital illustration. My first one, made somewhere around November of last year. The post date isn't exactly accurate sometimes. But what I did want to do was share my thoughts about my experience thus far, things I might have done differently, and maybe things I could elucidate onto people that might be looking for a bit of inspiration in this department. So, why did I want to draw? 2 words, buddy. 9 souls. This game came out of nowhere for me. I played it. I was enamored by the art style, and as soon as I finished the game, I decided I wanted to do something different. So I drove to Michael's Art Supplies. I picked up a sketchbook and a couple pencils, and I drew for 11 days, and it was awkward, but I enjoyed it. Shortly thereafter, I picked up a drawing tablet. I picked up a Wacom 1, roughly the size of a sheet of paper. It translates pencil movement and pen pressure onto a screen. I originally started off using Photoshop. May or may not have dubiously acquired it. Shoutouts to Tom. I transitioned into using Clip Studio Paint. Used to have a free trial of it, now I don't have the free trial of it. Won't say how much I've given the parent company to own it. And what I think might be important to mention is that throughout this process, I've known a couple people that have been very big help in me growing over time. I'll take some time to mention them at the very end, but I think what's been important for this whole process has been several positive feedback loops that I think can't be understated. So we're on my Tumblr. I made a Tumblr for some reason as the site where I wanted to post these online. Seemed as good as any. I also have a couple friends who still use it, and they were very nice and like to repost my art sometimes. So we're going to start off with the first drawing. I drew an achievement image from 9 Souls. This is one of the first achievements you get. My vengeance starts here. And it was really more a chance to play around with Photoshop's settings and tools. The line work is very squiggly. There's only 2 layers. You'll see this hopefully metamorphosize over time. I devised a signature here. A dash wind sign cubes. Hope you understand it. Day 2, I think I already see a marked improvement. This is a character that I made in a fighting game named Valkenheim. And a couple more refinements. The main thing that I think sticks out here is that I hand shaded. I didn't know how to use the paint bucket. I didn't know how to use different layers for shading, but still I think that I was able to emulate his face fairly well for day 2. Then we go into doing a bit of study work. Eyes, face, Avatar the Last Airbender has very interesting eyes. I was requested to do an emote, Peepo Gaslight, did a little Peepo action. Emulate a couple pictures that I found on Tumblr that I really found cute. This is from a guy named Mac, who likes to draw a lot of 9 Souls art. And this is just Coral from Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight also has an art style that I really like emulating. This is a comic that I drew for my buddy Deathy, who was struggling on this boss. This is me trying to emulate a Bob Ross painting. I watched a video on my second monitor, and I tried to emulate his style using brushes. I feel like if I were to do this again today, it would be a lot faster, but I had to keep pausing the video because I had to learn where all the tools were. Scout from DRG, another IP that I really enjoy. Scene from Nine Souls, black and white. Character from Hollow Knight. One of my characters from World of Warcraft, Earthen Warrior. Another one of my characters, Drakthir. Donald Duck. I love copyright infringement, Sora. Mission Control from DRG. Doing a lot of face work here. Pantheon of the Night was very hard. I wanted to draw something to celebrate. King Slime was recommended by a friend. Couldn't find a compelling one in the true art style of Terraria, but this artist's rendition was very interesting. Soldier scene from Kitty's video Team Fabulous 2. Ripped to a real one. A scene from Klaus. I watched this movie for the first time last year and really enjoyed it. You kind of start to see very early on the days where I felt like I had more time or more juice in the tank, and days where I felt like I just wanted to do something really quick and then go to bed. Something like the Pure Vessel, or something like Donald here. Something like Klaus. I think I was low on energy. I was close to bed and I wanted to do something more than nothing to get something out there, get more practice. But something like this was an example of something I wanted to dedicate a lot more time for. It's a scene from Hollow Knight. And I feel like this was pretty good, all things considered, at the time. But this marks, I think, one of the big transition points in the first 50 days of me drawing, was that I would share these with a couple people. One of them was a friend of mine named ChickadeepAnxiety, and she commented on how scratchy everything looked, and I did a lot of short lines, very, very short lines, very sketchy, and she kind of just said try to make them a bit smooth and long to give it more definition. And I think I really took that to heart afterwards. Maybe not immediately afterwards. Nightmare King, Hades weapons, Hades character. A reference that my friends wanted me to make. I humbly request a drawing of Smug Knuckles from Sonic Underground cosplaying Stubborn Detective. This is from a game that we played named Arkham Horror. Chicken Scratch, but it got the job done. Chrono Triggers, Frog. This is the first time I think I truly practiced with longer line work. Up to this point, I think it's worth mentioning that I've only ever drawn using references. What I mean is that I put a picture in the corner of the monitor. I don't trace over it, but I try to emulate it to the best of my ability. And I worried about doing that early on because I thought that it wouldn't allow me to flex creative chops. But what I think I've come to appreciate over time is that drawing for me feels a lot like when I tried to learn violin a few years ago. It's important to learn the fundamentals of how to play the instrument before you should do things on your own. Some people want to bypass that process entirely, which I don't think is wrong, but I think for me, I really wanted a strong grasp of the fundamentals before I felt like I could branch out. Because especially in this picture, I couldn't draw fingers like this if I wasn't staring intently at how her fingers were drawn at the same time. Fume Knight from Dark Souls 2. Still a little scratchy, but I think I'm trying to get better at the more confident line work. This, I think, was a big step up for me, this drawing of Hornet, in that it was the first time I think I tried to do proper shading, and a lot of the lines feel more confident here. Very long swoops, not a lot of dashed lines that are indicative of me not having confidence or a steady hand. What I do remember from this piece, though, is that everything is one layer. The lines, the colors, the shades, even this string going behind Hornet from her needle, I had to erase or fill over from her face. And also, if you zoom in enough, you can see that the paint bucket tool that I used leaves a bit of a white outline over the lines. So this is where I really started to come into, I have a problem specific to the software that I'm drawing, and let me look up a way to solve it. I'm learning more about the things I don't know. Another really big improvement just from the opening cinematic of Nine Souls. And I think this is part of why I really enjoyed the art style a lot. I think it conveys a lot with very little lines. Backgrounds can be fairly detailed, but I think the character work doesn't need a lot of detail. Especially Yi, the main character, the fact that he doesn't have a mouth, but you can tell his emotes from just lines around his eyes, I think was very compelling. I think that was part of why drawing something like this was a lot less daunting than I originally thought. There's not a lot of unique colors, there's not a lot of unique lines here. It was very empowering to see myself trying to do something like this and somewhat succeeding. This is a gift that I drew for a friend named Syrups. Syrups and I used to raid together in World of Warcraft a few years ago, and they still, to this day, do digital artwork professionally. Their character's a bit of a unique one. It's a familiar in a pot, and it makes whatever liquid is in it sentient. So I wanted to sort of homage that in a character in Nine Souls. This mystic nymph, I made it as their character. Very sloppy, but I think I got the rough idea across at day 29. This is a bit of a meme that I wanted to do. I just finished Undertale for the first time recently, and I just wanted Sans drawing a gun that didn't do anything. If you notice, the hand is backwards. I think Sans would have really liked that. I did the 2xKO alpha. I really liked Brahms' animations. Paid homage to him. I'm getting a bit better about color management here. If you look at the layers here, there's still no layer separating colors from shades. I haven't quite learned that yet, but I'm starting to get a grasp on how different parts of something ought to be shaded based off of their position. Low effort meme day. Luigi Neron Falco. My friend Steven liked that. First time playing Outer Wilds, wanted to draw something fairly alright with this one. Perspective of the twins could be better, I think. Another one I'm fairly proud of. Love me some burger pants. A little bit better on the shading. If you zoom in there, you can see there's a bit of a gap. A little bit of a sloppiness. We might call that a design decision and not sloppiness. Who knows? This is a weird one. I just wanted to draw this on a whim, but it got picked up by the SpongeBob community of Tumblr, and I think it's my most interacted with post to date on this account. It's a pretty decent picture, don't get me wrong, but I think it speaks power on what I notice a lot of artists complain about, which is the stuff you put the most effort into isn't almost ever the things that get the most traction. Interesting observation. Played Tunic. Good Zelda-like. Would recommend. Hades. I'm pretty proud of this one too. The lines are fairly choppy, especially around the shoulder plate here, and it kind of looks like his shoulder's disconnected from his torso a little bit. But getting the highlighting of his raised cheekbones and the top part of his facial hair I thought was fairly good. Another Tunic picture. This one was a pretty big one because it's part of the game, but not from a perspective you would ever see. Tunic is not over-the-shoulder action RPG, it's very isometric. So this is me interpreting what a boss fight would have looked like from another perspective. And I felt like I did alright with it. A little bit of a spoiler for Nine Souls, don't read it too closely. This is another one that I did pretty much off the cuff. This scene is not verbatim in the game anywhere, so I thought I did a pretty alright job. Line work could be a little bit better. Did something with Hermes from Hades. I really liked Hades' art style. It was pretty scratchy, but I'm not confident doing faces, let alone human faces, so this was just an excuse to draw more of a face thing. I felt like I did a lot better with this one. I really like how Hades does what the artists called Skittles, where they do these high saturation points that contrast the dark areas. And I got kind of obsessed with them for a bit. Maybe you might see what I mean a little bit later. Played Witcher 3. Really like this guy. Low effort Germa post. What can you do? Not everyone can be a dinger. Zoltan from The Witcher 3. Just a lazy line work day. Vanini from Liza P. I was pretty happy with this one, actually. It's very cartoonized compared to what he looks like in the game. It's an Unreal Engine game, so he looks fairly realistic. And I felt like I did a good job simplifying his silhouette and outfit and adding the funny little thing in the bottom right here. Germa. Always good to try to draw Germa. I feel like I did a pretty good job with this one. I really don't feel comfortable drawing human faces, even stylized simplified human faces, but I think what helps is not trying to do so much hard lines and try to trust shading to show things like the pits of the cheeks or the curve of the lip more so. Another instance of trying to draw something from nothing. This is a move that Valkenheim does from the fighting game that I play him as, but you never see it from first-person perspective. I think it looks kind of terrifying in hindsight. The big thing that I wanted to do it for was this Saitama rendition of the main character of the game. That's a sticker on one of my friend's servers now. Ryan Gosling. I felt like this one was alright, experimenting with big highlights, contrasted greens. I'm pretty happy with this one. Halfway point, day 50, Giovanna's who I mained when I played Guilty Gear. This is very heavily using the reference for it. There's still no tracing going on here, and I do feel like I'm starting to get a bit more of an idea of how proportions on a humanoid ought to be, because I remember that the arm, when I first drew it, was like down here, and I had to adjust a lot of the lines to bring it back up. I'm starting to get better at not accepting the first pass and seeing where things ought to change, and also getting a bit better at what looks good for shading. This is an interesting one. I was really motivated today for some reason. I did edits. This is a super that Valkenheim does where he goes from butler mode into wolf mode. And I did a little bit of an overlay. I feel like it looks pretty nice. These are just 2 frames from his frame data in the game, basically. And just a alpha filter over one of them to make it look a bit more striking, I suppose. Pretty happy with that one. This might be a bit of a deep cut. I made this as a shit post. A buddy of mine named Lettuce was in OnlyFans when he said "eat shit, I'm running" when Tyler died.
I'm running! Eat shit, I'm running!
Pretty happy with this one. This is a character from a YouTube channel called Funk, F-U-N-K-E, lowercase e, who likes to talk about esoteric and interesting game ideas, and what strikes me about his character design are these saturated highlight areas around certain edges of his 3D model that he uses. And I really wanted to emulate it, and I feel like I learned quite a bit trying to make something like this. I thought it looked pretty nice too. There was a thread that I found where there was a neat little Matchbox cat, and I wanted to do one that looked like Yi from Nine Souls. A little bit of a shitpost. It's important to draw what you think is fun sometimes. Pretty proud of this one. This is Sisyphus and his boulder as depicted by Hades, made by Supergiant. Really going crazy with the Skittles there, those subtle little highlights you see everywhere. Pretty proud of most of how the line work looks here. I think the belt might need to shift a bit to the right, at least where his hand is relative to it. But overall, pretty happy. Trailer for Liza P. Really liked the game, drew this from it. And this was also an interesting one. Liza P is, as I said, it looks very realistic as far as the human proportions and models go. I'm getting better at stylizing it down, and I wanted to see if I could apply the Hades Skittles effect to something, make it look a bit more striking and high contrast, because this character does not look like... This character is striking this pose in the trailer, but the high-low saturation is nowhere near this apparent. It's a lot more gray washed out in the trailer. I felt like I did a pretty good job, as well as doing these coat stitch line patterns. Very happy with that one. Germba. Skittles for no reason. Probably a bit of a low-effort day. I liked a video from Thorn O'Clock about drawing in the Hades art style, learning a bit how it all works together. Just did a bit of practice on it. Could be better. Northern Lion, please be afraid. Please be very afraid. I think it looks better up close, actually. Maybe I'm just getting blinded by the top part. Germa again. Bit of a low effort day. Day 60. This is TK 214B, my beloved. Fun input. I was pretty happy with the shading on this one, actually. It goes back to what I talked about with a lot of the carrying for what a face looks like isn't in hard lines, but with contrast between dark and light areas. It was very annoying to draw a couple things. The hand looks like a mess back here. The cuff is really big. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it. This is when I started playing Monster Hunter Wilds, and I just wanted to draw a lot of monsters from the bestiary. Monster Hunter Wilds is a very realistic looking game, even though the monsters are not realistic. It's rendered in a modern engine, so it's hard to make out distinct things I'd want to draw from to make a bit more of a basic thing. But the book that has all of the beasts in it has these stylized cartoons, and I thought they looked pretty nice. So I just went on a really long stretch, actually, of drawing monsters that were entries in this book, and as time went on, I went from just doing lines and filling them in to doing lines and then hiding them after I did fill, to adding a bit of a dirt effect, because the book kind of wants you to think that it's this used field guide, so there's a bit of dirt inside the drawings in the actual book. More monsters, more monsters, more monsters. This guy looks like he had coffee spilt on him. This is where I start experimenting with other brush settings in Clip Studio Paint, other brush types. These flowers are a brush you can use in Clip Studio, where if you run your pen across the canvas, it will draw a line of these flowers. You can control the size and the spacing. A pretty powerful tool if used discreetly. It might be a bit too obvious and break immersion if it's used too often, which of course that means I'm going to use it to death until I learn how it actually works, like with the foliage and leaves in this one. And this one. Some of the gore I thought was alright. This background was completely something that I wanted to make, something a bit striking and spooky. Might not have been the best colors. I think it clashes a little bit with his color scheme, but still looks pretty decent. Gravios, more monsters. Okay, we're hitting a pretty big recent breakpoint in my art journey, which is, if you've noticed a pattern up through now, before the monster section, I was kind of drawing whatever I wanted to draw willy-nilly. There was a couple days here, a couple days there, a couple days everywhere of doing different things, but what I started to do, what I decided when I saw this person's work, Tyson Tan, I really liked it. They do character design work. They've worked on games like Freedom Planet. They're Chinese-based artists, so they pull inspiration from stuff that might not be apparent to Western audience. And they draw this sort of cel-shady, kind of anime, kind of not cutesy animal art style that I thought it reminded me of Nine Souls a bit, but for different reasons. He definitely leans more into the cute than Nine Souls does, and I was taken by it. And I decided that I wanted to only try to remake the drawings Tyson did for the next month. And the first one took a while. I think this took like 4 hours to do, because I was trying to do a lot of stuff that felt like they were doing that I wasn't familiar with. Things like these highlight and low light shadows, things like the shape of the fabric, things like this telescope, were things I wasn't familiar with actually drawing. And as we go on, just keep trying to do new things. This low poly bunny, I had a lot of fun drawing because I did a lot of line draws. These weren't hand drawn. I used a tool to draw straight lines over and over again, which I thought was a very nice skill to practice that I wasn't using before, to make this sort of striking sharp edge effect on a kind of character. Character that they designed for Krita, which is a open source drawing engine. This was one that I was really not going to be happy about for most of it. They drew a mech that was a mascot for uh, Godot, the open source gaming engine, and it was deceptively detailed. And I was drawing the backside of it with lines, and nothing felt like it stood out. And I was thinking this is going to be awful. And it never clicked together until I started shading it. And I think that taught me two things, is that one, don't kill your darlings too early. And two, I'm never working with mechs ever again if I can help it. It just wasn't... I think that the anatomy of a mech doesn't appeal to me enough aesthetically for me to want to draw something this deceptively intricate more often than I have to. Bat Lady, this was apparently a character that was from a bunch of characters they designed for Freedom Planet 2. I really liked this idea that he had for a reporter Batwoman that had hands that were anatomically more accurate to a real-life bat, which is to say that their hands and digits make their wings. So he designed things like shoes that had hooks on them that she could use to grab her suitcase, because her actual hands probably can't do too much. I was very taken by it. Dog in the Rain, this kind of highlighting to show that it's a piece of fabric that's its sheen, and it's wet, was interesting to try to grapple with. Owlboy, never played Owlboy, but I thought that his artistic rendition of the character was pretty nice. Another open source mascot. This one was a little tricky because of the lack of color variety, made doing different things with the face and the legs kind of challenging. Lazy Mage from a tabletop campaign that they were designing for. The hat's kind of weirdly shaped if you look at it for long enough, but I feel like I got the overall vibe of it pretty well down. Tyson's OC, a rat character, because they were born the year of the rat. This was an interlude that I did. My friend requested to me, you know that meme of the pelican trying to eat the capybara? I said, yeah. He said, can you do that with Pelipper and Slowpoke? And I said, I'll see what I can do. And I think what you can see here is that I'm starting to use things that I picked up from just reference drawings. Not to great effect, but I'm at the very least using them. These sort of choppy highlights that are meant to show that there's fur on the Slowpoke, and the bit of a choppy outline to show that there's fur. And the shadows and the color fill, I feel like it's starting to show that I'm using things that I've learned to be applied to other things, which was a nice confidence boost. He really liked this. Lendao from Howie and Lendao, a show that aired in China in the 90s, early 2000s. Drew a couple characters from it. I thought that she looked pretty nice. The final character study from Tyson Tao. So we went from 72 to 84 with the one in the middle skipped. That was 11 drawings of 2 to 4 hours each drawing. That included a sketch phase, line art phase, colors, shading, blocking, maybe background. And I feel like I learned a lot in that relatively small amount of time spent drawing. It was close to a month of emulating their style. And what I think you can see is that I started getting a lot more confident in things that were patterned throughout their style, and I realized by the end of this that if I really wanted to get better at a certain artist's style, it would be better to just try to remake what they do for a while until I learn through repetition what it is that makes their art pop, what makes it click, because just looking at it and not trying to draw it sometimes is not obvious for me. And I really appreciate Tyson Tan's work, and that they have a pretty nice website that shows all their art. And this coincided with going back to Nine Souls. So Nine Souls had a 3-part prequel manga series come out about some of the characters that were featured in the actual game in some ways, and I decided to do it again, start emulating nonstop again. And this time I decided to emulate the manga panels specifically from Nine Souls and its related surrounding media. It's very nice to do this with Nine Souls because I think that The character designs are relatively simplistic because of how this species is. Their hair is very simple to draw. Their ears are very simple to draw. The most striking thing about them is their eyes, by a long shot. And these eyes, as we go back to the ones that I first talked about, they are doing so much of the emotional heavy lifting in these expressions that it fascinates me. And this is also a good time to practice doing halftones. If you ever look at something in a newspaper or a manga or a comic book that has these dotted patterns that are meant to emulate shading, they're referred to as halftones, and I just learned how to use them properly on this drawing, and I fell in love with them. I love halftones now. I feel like halftones are going to be part of my repertoire for forever, because I really like how they look for some reason. I've been very happy to practice and fail and practice again with how to actually use them. Another panel from the manga, when Chief Engineer, main character of the manga, Lear. More halftones here, subtle halftone gradient, no halftones on when. Manga panel from the game itself, a little bit of weird use of halftones by me to make the skybox, but I was fairly happy with it all around. This is also around the time where I started actually recording time lapses in Clip Studio Paint, which is very easy to do. And this is where I actually started posting them. And I got a bit of a funny story about this one in particular. This character does not say this text in the game, but I decided to use it to steal from a meme and to avoid spoilers. But as we watch this time lapse, I was so proud of myself for drawing this as well as I did. The day after I finished it, I was able to speak loudly and clearly at a work meeting with such confidence as I had not had at work in a long time. And I think that kind of shows the benefit of a pursued hobby, a creative hobby like this, is that I'm not doing this to try to make money. Not now, probably not for a long time, if ever. I'm not doing it to get attention more than, hey, let me share with my friends what kind of stuff I decided to draw today. But the intrinsic value that I got from making this, being very proud of just the fact that I was able to overcome a couple hurdles with how do I emulate things like this halftone gradient and these speed lines behind the character here. How do I get both the cell tone shading and the hard line shading that's so used often in this art style? How do I make the pattern on their cloak? Because if you watch in the time lapse, what happens here, you can barely see it, but I draw it out here, and I use the free transform tool to copy paste it along his outfit. So that was me using a tool for the first time. I did not draw these in place. I used the tools at my disposal to basically make a pattern. And that was a pretty big step for me. And the rest of it is just going back to the fundamentals that I learned prior, like using different layers for shading and colors and whatnot. Getting a bit more freaky with the background. And it was just a culmination of so much stuff that I've been working towards that it was hard not to be proud of it. And I hope that anybody who might be watching this, that you can take at least that away. It doesn't matter if you get good enough to impress certain people or make a living off of it. If you can look at what you've done and be proud of it for just having done it, then that's enough. And that's what makes it worth it. Certain people in my timeline didn't like me calling it this. Did you have to call it that, OP? There's a scene in the history, not direct spoilers of the game, where a tyrant on his last legs writes a passage named The Parting Missive, but I just called it The Sharding Pissive, as a little funny. Another time lapse here, way more halftones being sloppy than anything. Also, this is a bit atrocious. The scroll starts here, it goes along here. Why does the line of it break off in such a straight line there? It's as if it shrinks. It's okay to be critical of art that you've done before, but I can still be proud of it too. I was complimented for how well I drew his back fur fluff here. Another manga panel. It was not framed like this in the game. I added the party hard and the spacing around here. I was fairly happy with that little bit of creativity that I added to it. A pretty striking panel. I like how the pink is accented against the grays, the blacks, and the whites here. I feel like I did the table in the foreground I think is pretty sloppy. The bowl here looks like it's pointed, but overall still fairly decent. Other manga panels, this doesn't have the speech bubbles from the game, nor is it, I think, in the exact order. These days where I draw several manga panels in the same piece, I think have been very interesting because nothing has your full attention for the entire time, so you're okay with yourself being a bit speedier and less exact with other parts because you're trying to get the whole thing done. I'm not saying that's how real manga artists do it, but I sort of approach it as a bit more of a, I need to do several things today, so let me be a bit more forgiving with myself for part of the whole thing. Bit of a jokey one. His face doesn't scrunch up like this in the actual game, but I made him look like Willem Dafoe when he looks up in that one GIF. This one taught me that I'm very bad at drawing feet. I believe a wise man once said that it's hard to draw feet because if you draw them too well, people think that you have a fetish. Went a bit crazy with the halftones on the stairs there too. But what can you do? I played Monster Hunter World after Wilds, and I tried to solo Fatalis with a hammer, and I think 9 out of 10 attempts I saw 30 minutes times up. And I think it took me like 5 days to defeat him. So this was event piece more than anything. I made him look like one of the Divine Serpent, not enemies, vehicles I suppose, that are in the background in some zones in Nine Souls too. This is also a bit of that, I'm taking a reference, but I'm adding my own spin on it, which at the end of the day, I feel like, what's the difference between that and doing your own thing anyway? It's fun. It's fun to do things a bit different like that. Shadong's a character from Nine Souls. He makes booze by vomiting poison. I was pretty happy with this one. Burger Pants Yi, Jiquan's. My power went out when I drew this, and I was close to done, and I didn't save like the entire time. When it came back, I just looked up where are the backups stored in Clip Studio Paint, and wouldn't you know it, it backed up 10 minutes before the power went out. So this is only possible as you're seeing it now through the power of modern technology. Also remember to save, kids. Manga panels from the prequel. Again, striking eyes, very simplistic faces and heads. It's part of what I really like about this whole art style. And this is another big one. This is my cringe OC. It was time after a while, wasn't it? It's a culmination of a few things. So, number one, I wanted to make a character that looked a bit like me in some aspects and was a bit fanciful in others. So what actually looks like me here, I wear collared shirts more often than not. I wear glasses. They don't look like those, but I do wear glasses. And I wear my hair like Geralt sometimes, where it's that half pony. And on top of everything else, I wanted to make this a bit of a PNG tuber thingy, which if you're not familiar with what that means, it's like a VTuber, which is a character acts in place of you having a face cam. And a PNG is like a VTuber, except instead of a fully rigged 3D model, it's just a talk frame and a mouth closed frame. And on top of that, if you're noticing, they both move, kind of. They kind of vibrate. I looked this up, and I was inspired by somebody named Shenpai, who I watched on Twitch randomly, who makes PNG tubers that do this. It sort of emulates a style, if you're familiar with seeing from Ed, Edd n Eddy, where the line work, all the lines for this drawing, are just done several times, and you just trace over the old ones. And because of the imperfections of the copying process, they all look slightly different. So they kind of make this still image look like it shakes a little bit. I believe the Ed and Eddie guys said that they did that to add to the chaotic feel of the show. And I just think it looks really nice. So what does it actually look like in practice? Well, let's open it. And you can see it in the bottom right. And I'll pull it over to the left here. This is a little trick of OBS in that I set up a application called VideoTube Mini, open source by the way, to listen to my mic and simply play a different GIF, whether or not there is or isn't anything being input into the microphone. And I think it works pretty damn well. So we're just going to keep him there for the rest of this here video. Once I fiddle with the activation settings. Okay. And now we get to the final day, day 100. I decided to make it simple. I've had the same profile picture for I don't know how long, but it is in the top left there. Feast your eyes. This is my profile picture on all socials associated with this name for over 10 years, and I got it from an old friend I used to play Team Fortress 2 with, named Findy, who made little MS Paint drawings that were meant to be facsimiles of other people's actual profile pictures that they used. But because my profile picture at the time changed so much because I was a wacky little 15-year-old, he just decided to make one based off of my name that I used. And I've just been using that for over 10 years, and I decided, let's make something new. And what I ended up doing was a bit of an homage to it, and a chance to practice something, which was, I took that original image, and I made a brush out of it, which meant that as I moved the pen across the page, it would dump a bunch of these original icons to make the brush stroke, and it makes it look kind of rustic. And I just added a little bit of a shadow and sun/moon in the background, what have you. And that's my new profile picture. Look at that. And that's day 100. And if we can go all the way back down to the bottom here, and we can, I think, feel a lot of difference here. And what I think is important to understand about the whole thing here is that a lot of this so far has been learning how to use the software that I'm using as much as it has been how to actually apply artistic concepts. Because I might have been doing things that would have or wouldn't have translated directly to something like, just working on a pencil and paper. I do think that going forward, the work needed to improve will happen a lot quicker because I know how to use a lot of the tools already inside of the application that I'm using. And the nice part is that a lot of them are transferable. A lot of the stuff I do in Clip Studio Paint, you can do in Photoshop, you can do in Krita. You just have to learn what they're called and where they're located. That might be a bit different. Now what comes in the next 100 days, maybe, is learning a bit more of the old school artistic principles, like how do you shade something more accurately? How do you draw in certain styles a bit more faithfully? And I'm looking forward to it. I think that, well, I've actually drawn a couple personal pieces I haven't posted on here. I don't feel like sharing those, no offense. But maybe you'll figure out where I actually do post those elsewhere. And what can we take away from this experience so far? There's a lot of videos like this on YouTube, and I have watched a fair bit of them. And I really enjoy seeing other people's experiences with trying to become an artist. And I think most of what I have to say is, I think it echoes what a lot of people have said about this, which is, you should enjoy it first and foremost. You shouldn't force yourself to do something because it feels like it's the right thing to do if you don't want to do it. There's a person that I watched very early on about digital art named PCAT who liked to say, fun before dementals, which is very cheesy, but I think it's very true, especially for a pursued hobby, is that try to draw what you think is fun. Like, even though I said over and over and over again, here, oh man, I really appreciated just buckling down and just emulating Tyson's style for an entire month. I was diligent about it. I didn't let myself slip. But I wouldn't have got to a point where I wanted to do this and had fun doing it if I didn't do all of this first, all this random stuff, to learn what I actually wanted to do later on. I would say trust your intuition just a little bit. And if you have people that you trust to critique you, those people are important, but what's as important are people that gas you up. When I share these with my friends, they don't have anything bad to say, like ever. And that could be detrimental to long-term growth if that's the only voices that you hear. But I think that when you're just starting out with a creative hobby, you're like a seed that is trying to turn into a giant oak. It's really hard to bring down an oak tree when it's fully grown. It's very easy to stomp out a sapling. I think that when you're new, you need people in your corner that will just encourage you to keep on trying and failing. And then later on, when you're a bit more hardened, you look for and appreciate more critique and analysis of your work. I think I'm starting to get there myself, where I really like when people like Syrups and like Chickadee, I show them my work, they gas it up for a post or two, and they say, well, here's something that I might have done differently. And I know that a lot of art is subjective, so I always take it with a grain of salt. But nevertheless, I think it's been very valuable. I also wanted to mention a little funny thing that happened that I shared with Syrups. I sent the 100 drawing image to them over DM, and I thanked them personally, saying, you've helped me become the best artist that I could because you're willing to reach out and show me things. You showed me a lot of miscellaneous things I could do in Clip Studio Paint. You gave me brush packs and ideas, and I just want to say thank you. And I shared a story with them, which was not one day before I drew this 100th drawing, I was going for a walk on my lunch break at work, and I was walking on a rail trail by a pond, and I came across a retired older gentleman with a comb-over ponytail, big glasses, khaki shorts, and a giant camera. He was taking pictures of giant birds over by the pond with fish in their mouth. He walked back a bit with me, and we started chatting. And the topic of what do you do for fun, what do you do in your free time came up. I talked about drawing. And what was interesting was that he knew what a Wacom tablet was. And I told him that there have been people in my life that I knew from other things that have been doing art for a long time, and they help me out every now and again. And he turned to me and just said, mentors. And I guess you could say that. Not so formally. I think it hasn't been transactional like I consider traditional mentorships to be. But I think it's important to understand that's what they are nevertheless. It's important to have lifelines that you have that are experts in a field, even if you're just doing it for a hobby. If you want to get better at it, it's good to immerse yourself with people that do it more, do it in a way that you like, do it in a way that you want to emulate. And I guess that's one more thing to share that I think is important, is that when I was trying to learn the violin, I couldn't keep practicing because I had nobody to play with. When I've been drawing, I could share it with people who knew more than me very easily. And I think that that's been a very good part of how I got so good so fast. It wasn't that I showed them a drawing and they told me do this and suddenly the next drawing was perfect. It was, I showed them one thing every 20 drawings And they gave me like 2 little tips. And as I applied those tips more and more, I felt like every other thing I learned by myself at the same time sort of matrixed together into a better whole. Those missing pieces were very important for me. I think I've been rambling for long enough, and I look forward to doing at least another 100 days. Look forward to drawing more and more different things, finding more inspiration. I am starting to pick games and books to read more on whether they will give me a good source of material to pull from for a new well of artistic inspiration, which is interesting. I've got a couple in the backlog that I'll be looking forward to playing really soon, just for new things to make me want to draw. So this is definitely not the end of my journey here. And I hope that if you've watched up to now, you've been able to take something away from it. And I hope that you've enjoyed. I just want to say thank you very much.